You did, Will. Good job. Come on in. All right. Welcome, welcome. I want to get us started. It is 5:30, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Thank you. Here. Okay, so we're in a new location this year, and thanks to Wenatchee School District, we have the boardroom, and we get to have microphones, so we can also live stream our events. So families all across the state of Washington, if they want to log in, can, and to learn the information, as all of the information that's shared tonight is universal across our state. So everybody, they might hear something and learn something, and they can go to their counties and be able to look it up and get some information there as well. So I am thrilled to have you all here today. My name is Beth Sykes, and I am the transition teacher in the Wenatchee Valley Community Transitions. And I'm going to introduce the people that we've partnered with. I'm calling them up. Come on up. This coming up is Tina Gorman. She is the transition specialist, one of them from Eastmont School District. Hi. We have Tamara Burns from the county DD office, Jared Gronin from the county DD office. And tonight we're going to hear from Dayla Rice from DDA, Rod Duncan from DDA, Danny Johnson from DDA, who will be online, and he'll be talking about eligibility. And then we have Laura Hamilton from DVR, and she'll be sharing with us about DVR. Oh, and Mary Crago's online. Hi, Mary. So she'll be joining us as well. And we have interpreters, our Spanish interpreters in person. We have Lupita Alanis, and online we have Elena Vasquez. If you are online and if you need Spanish interpreting, there's a little globe on the Zoom room, in the Zoom room. Okay. And you just click on that, and that will take you right into a room where you can hear Elena speak and translate the message tonight. Also, for those of you in the room, if you have a question, you have a mic at your table. All of the mics have a red light currently on them. If you want to speak or ask a question, please push the gray button, I believe, on that box, and the light will turn green. It's a black button. Okay, so push that button, please. Thank you, Deets. If you forget to turn off that button or push the button again and make that light red, everything you say can be picked up and recorded and live streamed. So you want to make sure that you turn it on and turn it off. This is live streamed, so that means it is being recorded. There are permission slips to be on video. The county does require that folks that are going to be recorded do sign a permission slip. So I believe those are back on the back table with Tina, perhaps, or maybe just signing in is saying that you acknowledge that. So with that, we're going to get going with Danny Johnson from DDA, and he is going to talk with us about eligibility.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Can somebody let me know if you can hear me?
Yes, they can hear you.
Oh, okay. So hi, I'm Danny Johnson. I work for Developmental Disabilities Administration, and specifically my work is doing intake and eligibility determinations for DDA. So I sent a SharePoint, I think, to Beth. You guys run that, right? I'm assuming. Okay.
Yes, Danny, I'm assuming.
Okay, because yeah, anyway, I don't do these very often virtually, so I'll let you control that. So again, I work for Developmental Disabilities Administration. So if you don't know who we are, we are part of DSHS. We are the agency that serves people specifically who meet the requirements or the definition of developmental disabilities in the state of Washington. You can go to the next slide. No? Can somebody move the slides? I don't know. Mine's not moving, so I don't know what's happening on your end with the PowerPoint. Yeah. So like I said, we're the main door for services for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So going to the next slide, what is a developmental disability? So part of the definition of developmental disability in the state of Washington are these bullet points right here. So it originates before you turn 18 years old. It is continued, or something that will continue or expect to continue indefinitely, a condition that will continue to continue indefinitely, and constitutes a substantial limitation to the individual with a developmental disability. And then the 3 steps to get to services is, first you need to go through the eligibility process so DDA can determine if you meet the eligibility criteria. And then once you go through that process of the initial eligibility, once you request a service, you must be functionally eligible. So there's an assessment once you go through the eligibility process with me or one of my coworkers to see if you meet that definition. Then once you request a service from DDA, you're going to be assigned a case manager who will assess your functional eligibility. They do an assessment to do that. And they also make sure that you are financially eligible. There's no financial eligibility requirement to apply to be a DDA client. But for services, once you get through that process and you get into the service piece, for most of our services, there is a financial eligibility piece. Okay. So the next slide, please. So the application process, the basic determination process, involves in the number 1 bulletin point there, there's a few documents that are part of our eligibility application packet. There's a request for eligibility determination. There's consent forms. There's a privacy form similar to the one you would fill out when you go to the doctor, like the HIPAA form. There's also what's called the sources for eligibility information. And if you have a guardian, a legal guardian, we like to get that information too as well. To get the application packet, there's a couple ways you can access that application packet. You can go to the DDA website, to the eligibility page, and you will find links to all of those forms right there. The other way you can access that packet is you can call the DDA office, your local DDA office, and request that they mail you a hard copy to fill out, or you can go into the DDA office and get that hard copy as well. So what the process looks like is, once the DDA case manager evaluates the evidence, we look to see that you provided evidence that you are a Washington State resident, because that's also part of being DDA eligible, is you have to be a resident of Washington State. This is a state program, not a federal program. So as far as DDA goes, so you need to prove that you have state residency. You need to show evidence that you have a disability with an onset prior to age 18, that are one of the disabilities that DDA recognizes, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And again, evidence of the qualifying condition, and evidence of substantial limitations. And that typically means there's testing scores that are currently required, which are typically an IQ test, an intelligence test, cognitive test score, and an adaptive skills assessment score. And once you apply, then you will be given, you'll eventually receive a letter that says who your eligibility worker is and their contact information. So you can contact them throughout the process to find out a status report on your application. And then once a final determination is made, you will also be contacted by phone and also by letter what that outcome will be, whether you're found eligible or not eligible for developmental disabilities. Next slide, please. So the basic determination process for birth to 3. Is anybody interested in hearing about birth to 3 today, since I think these are like parents of high school kids? I didn't hear that. Rod, if you're speaking to me, I don't hear you.
We're going to skip it. I went ahead and moved it forward.
Oh, thank you so much. How long does the determination process take? So, basically what we tell people is we have up to 90 days to make a determination. But more specifically, we have 30 days. We have to make a determination 30 days after we receive the last piece of documentation to make our decision. So overall, it's a 90-day, it can be up to 90 days. We have to have a decision by the 90th day after we receive your application, but it should be 30 days after we get the last piece of information. If DDA has insufficient information to determine you eligible and has not received all the requested documentation, we still need to make a denial of your eligibility by the 90th day. So even if we've requested some information, if it hasn't come in by the 90th day, we have to deny your eligibility. And then, after that, you can always reapply, or if we get if the information comes in after we make a determination, a denial determination, we can review that information still and reopen it if it's going to change the decision. Typically, I'm just one of 5 people in region, or actually there's 7 of us now in region 1 who make these decisions. Typically, I'm going to call people and let them know that I did receive the information I had been waiting for, and whether it made a difference or not, I let those people know. That's what I do for my personal process. And then sometimes that can, sometimes we can, if it means that, like, we heard that somebody's having an autism evaluation and the report won't be done for maybe 2 weeks after the 90th day, we can get approval from our supervisor to keep that determination open, waiting for that information. So it's not a hard 90 necessarily, but that is what the rule says, that by the 90th day, we need to make that denial or make some sort of a denial or an approval decision. And then the last bullet point there is DDA is not emergency services. So, and frankly, like I said, this process could take up to 90 days. That's just for the initial eligibility piece. And then to get services started, because there's other assessments involved, the functional assessment, the financial eligibility piece, those also take time to get those done. So it's not a quick process typically to get services started. So the sooner you can apply to be DDA eligible and get through that first hurdle is the best thing. The best advice I can give you is to start that process as soon as you can. Because if your situation becomes a crisis, DDA unfortunately can't be of that much help because our processes don't work that quickly. Next slide, please. So the qualifying eligible conditions that are defined by our state legislature are intellectual disability, that's formally known as mental retardation. We have developmental delay, and recently this says under age 10. Just recently, the law was changed. There was legislation that was passed earlier this year that now we can keep people eligible under the developmental delay category up to but not over age 20. So you can be eligible up to but not over the age of 20 with developmental delay. And I'm going to get into the specifics about what's required for eligibility for each of these conditions in just a few slides. Cerebral palsy is another qualifying condition, epilepsy, autism, or there's this condition called another neurological or other condition closely related to intellectual disability. And we keep a very long and growing list of conditions that are neurological in nature or chromosomal in nature that might cause intellectual and adaptive deficits similar to intellectual disability. And an example of those would be like fetal alcohol syndrome might be an example of a neurological condition that would qualify you for DDA. A chromosomal condition, an example would be Down syndrome, something like that. So those are conditions that the authorities, you know, the doctors and so forth that are involved in researching and finding out more about those conditions have determined that these things in most cases cause intellectual and adaptive deficits. So we keep a long and growing list of those neurological and chromosomal conditions. So when we see one we haven't seen before, there's a vetting process for that. Okay, next slide. This table here tells you, it's a little confusing to look at. It tells you at what condition, at what age you can be eligible with it. And so for developmental delay, you can, the birth to 3 age group are made eligible under developmental delay. Also, if you don't have one of the other qualifying conditions by the time you're age 4, that now from 4 up to age but under 20, you can be eligible under that condition. So that screen there needs to be updated a little bit, because again, you can be eligible under developmental delay up to but under age 20. For intellectual disability, you cannot be eligible with intellectual disability until you are 4 years old, and you can still apply, you know, for developmental disabilities for a child that's under 4 years old. And if we can make them eligible, it's going to be under developmental delay. Same with cerebral palsy. Before we can accept that condition as a qualifying condition, you have to be age 4. So the intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, the epilepsy, the autism, and the another neurological and other conditions, those are like what we call our permanent conditions. So once you are eligible under those, your eligibility probably won't expire, but you might have a review, and I'll get into when those reviews happen in just a minute as well. Okay, any questions so far? No? Okay. So the required evidence. So when you apply for DDA eligibility, we don't just need an application from you. We also need you to provide us with the evidence that shows you have that developmental disability. We will help you get that evidence if you need to, and that's a part of the packet. That's what that consent form is for. If you don't have that evidence, that information, you can provide us with a consent form to help you get that information. But ultimately, the applicant is responsible to get us all the criteria, the information that would meet our criteria for eligibility. So for developmental delay, there needs to be some formal documentation, some formal assessments or testing that shows you have a developmental delay. And then in at least a few areas, if you're 0 to 3, there just needs to be one developmental delay that is 1.5 standard deviations below the mean. And you might not know what that means, but it's a score on some type of assessment tool. Like there's language assessment tools, cognitive assessment tools, adaptive assessment tools, social and communication assessment tools that professionals like OT-PT therapists would do, like a motor skills assessment, or a speech language pathologist might do some communication or language assessments to see if your child would qualify, or to assess if they have a delay and at what level that delay is. So not to belabor developmental delay too much, but for age 0 to 3, you have to have at least one delay that's 1.5 standard deviations below the mean, which is a score. If you are over age 3, you have to have 3 developmental delays that are at least 1.5 standard deviations below the mean. For intellectual disability, there needs to be a diagnosis that you have an intellectual disability, and we can only take that diagnosis from a licensed psychologist or a certified school psychologist. Okay, and then there also needs to be evidence of an adaptive skills assessment score and a composite score that's less than 70, so 69 or below on an adaptive. And for the full scale IQ there, it says less than 68. That's actually incorrect. It's less than 70. So it's 69 or below on most tests. There's some tests that it might be slightly different, but the basic rule is for intellectual disability, a full scale IQ score of 69 or below, and adaptive skills assessment score of 69 or below. Now, before I get too far, in regards to full scale IQ scores, the legislature has recently passed some legislation that DDA can no longer use IQ score to determine eligibility. However, that will not go into effect until 2025. Okay, so we still have to require an IQ score until 2025. We don't know when at least I haven't been made privy to the information about when that might happen in 2025. There also could be changes to our rules that they'll take away the IQ score, but they might add something else, and we just don't know those details at this point. But you can always check with DDA, with an intake and eligibility worker at DDA, if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about that as time goes on. So with cerebral palsy, we need to have a diagnosis that's from a licensed physician. So that would be an MD of cerebral palsy. There needs to be evidence that you had the onset of your cerebral palsy prior to the age of 3. And you currently need to have evidence that you have direct physical assistance needs, daily physical assistance needs in at least 2 areas of daily living. So like eating, bathing, dressing, toilet use, mobility, or communication. You need to have evidence that shows you have 2 areas that you require daily physical assistance from another person to qualify with cerebral palsy, along with your diagnosis of cerebral palsy. Okay, and that piece that says onset prior to age 3, that does not mean necessarily you need to be diagnosed by the time you're 3, but usually a parent is going to notice that maybe their child is not developing speech and language prior to age 3, or they're having some motor skill issues prior to age 3, and may have that child in like a birth to 3 program or something. So there's evidence that's being built by that time, usually for somebody who has cerebral palsy. For the diagnosis of epilepsy or seizure disorder, that diagnosis needs to come from a board certified neurologist. The supporting evidence of the substantial limitations would include that your seizures need to be uncontrolled by medication. So if you are somebody who has been diagnosed with seizure disorder, but your seizures have always been controlled by medication, then you're probably not going to qualify with DDA. But if you're somebody who, like, medications have been tried over the years, sometimes they work and usually they fail and things like that, you're usually seeing a neurologist quite frequently, at least every 6 months or every year or two, to monitor that situation. So there would be evidence
Annie?
of that. Yeah.
Annie, I don't want to cut you off, but we're running out of time. How many more slides do we have for yours?
Oh gosh, sorry. Let me see here. We've got quite a few more because there's a total of 19 slides, and we're on what, like 6 or 7 or something like that. No, we're on 11. We're on 11. I'll hurry it along. Okay. Thank you. So just what's that?
Did you say 19 or 90? 19.
19. 119. 19.
Sorry, just wanted to check that.
That's okay. So we're getting there. I'll hurry it along. So, well, just suffice it to say that for each condition, there needs to be evidence of substantial limitations. Typically, those are going to be a full scale IQ score of a certain level. If it's autism, it's going to be an 85 or less, or excuse me, below 85, and 84 or below. If it's intellectual disability, it's a 69 or below, and I'm talking IQ. If it's another condition like neurological or chromosomal, it's less than 78. So 77 or below on the IQ. And for every condition except for the cerebral palsy, there's a requirement of an adaptive skills assessment that's score that's no more than 3 years old. And that is for every condition, it's a 69 or below on the adaptive assessment. So factors to consider when you want to apply for developmental disabilities is the full scale IQ and adaptive scores. Those scores cannot be attributed to mental illness or other psychiatric conditions. So you might be dually diagnosed with some other psychiatric condition like schizophrenia or ADHD or bipolar or something like that. Your testing scores, that professional who does that testing needs to indicate that you are stable and you are not experiencing those issues from those conditions while you were testing. So we know that it's based on the qualifying condition. Next slide. So expirations. So again, this needs to be updated. This slide here, but you will expire if you are in the birth to 3 age range. When you are made eligible, your eligibility will expire when you turn 4 years old on your 4th birthday. So DDA will send you out information 6 months prior to that birthday, send the parents information saying you're going to expire and you need to reapply and you need to contact us to reapply. There is no longer an expiration at age 10 because you can now be eligible for developmental delay up to age 20. There is no longer, we don't deal with the age 18 and the medically intensive. That's done through a different process. Currently, on the 20th birthday, if you were made eligible, or before the 20th birthday, if you were made eligible under another neurological or other condition, if you did not have an IQ score, but you had academic delays, we can maybe be able to take those academic delays in lieu of the IQ score. But after you turn 20, or before you turn, by the time you turn 20, we need to have evidence of an IQ score. Again, that'll be moot in 2025. So sorry to confuse you about that. And then everyone is reviewed at age 20. Their eligibility, you don't expire, but your eligibility is reviewed at age 20.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm going
next
to cut
slide.
you off here, Danny.
Okay.
It's 6 o'clock. Sorry.
Oh, sorry to go so long. I can
That's
talk all
right.
day. Call your eligibility worker if you have questions.
Yeah. Thanks.
Am I excused?
I think you're excused if you want to. Oh, you're certainly welcome to hang around.
Oh,
But
is there any questions? Can I quickly ask if there's any questions?
immediate questions around the eligibility itself.
If we do have a adult under 20 or under 20 that was diagnosed with developmental delay, can you do you have access for that if they were in certain programs? Is that how you can determine that eligibility?
Yeah, usually we're requesting like school records. If we can get a consent or you provide the special ed school psych evaluations, would have any testing that they might have done, that the school psych might have done. They update those assessments every 3 years. It's different than the IEP. It's the school psych evaluation that's done every 3 years. So if you present an application, you're going to want to put the school district on the consent form, and we can see if that information is with the school district. Or if your child has been seeing other therapists like an OTPT, speech language therapist, somebody like that, they might have also done some assessments that we could access or you could access to provide to us. And I can give my phone number. I don't mind phone calls if people have questions. It's if you want to write it down, and Dayla can give it to you. It's 509-601-8372.
I can give a little feedback for you. I know within Eastmont, probably within Wenatchee as well, when we have a student that we know is exiting or graduating, our school psych tries to do a reeval so that it is current, and we give that to them upon exit if we haven't already connected them with DDA. So
And I have worked with those school psychs.
families.
I so appreciate the Wenatchee school psychs. Tell them thank you. I love them because they are very accommodating, usually to us DDA eligibility workers when we call and request something from them. So please tell them thank you for their work.
All right. Thank you, Danny.
All right. Have a good night.
Let's go ahead to the next PowerPoint. So as Danny explained, there are the two processes in terms of being able to access services. The first one is the eligibility, which is what Danny was talking about. Being able to be eligible for DDA does not guarantee services. What? Oh, I'm Rod Duncan, sorry. I am the Community Inclusion and Transition Program Manager for the state, and work out of the Lacey headquarters office with DDA. So what we're going to talk about, what Dale and I are going to talk about is specific services and then how to access those. Next, I can do next slide myself, maybe.
To say real quickly too, that everything Danny was talking about
Sorry, I was just going to say everything that Danny was educating you on for eligibility. These brochures in a condensed kind of way are all in here, so please pick them up.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is actual services that individuals are eligible for. So this is the list of services that DDA provides: child development, employment services, community inclusion, community first choice, respite, architectural and vehicular modifications, equipment and supplies, specialized nutrition, and the list goes on. Those are all services that are available through DDA. We also provide support in residential services, whether it's adult family homes, alternative living, companion homes, group homes, supported living, state operated living, alternatives, and voluntary placement. This is where it gets a little confusing. All of our services are in fact Medicaid funded. And that's what he was talking about when he talks about the financial eligibility. Individuals have to be financially eligible to receive services. And we have two basic types of Medicaid funding. One is the state plan. And if you're on Medicaid, there are services that are an entitlement just because you're on Medicaid. And that's specifically the personal care services. And then we have a second category of funding, which is what's called waivers. And our waiver services are funded by the federal government. They share in the cost of providing those services. So those are limited. They're not entitlements. The federal government tells us how many slots they'll afford to pay. And then we commit to how many we can afford to pay, the state can afford, because we have to pay our share. So and those are not entitlements. Those are based on the amount of slots that we have available. Once you're on the waiver, though, the services that are available within that waiver are then entitlements. But being on the waiver itself is not an entitlement. So when we talk about state plan, that's the one that is, as long as you're on Medicaid, you are entitled to receive services. And it's the community first choice services. And so who's eligible for CFC? It's the financial eligibility, the fact that you are on Medicaid gives you that entitlement to personal care. We'll do a personal care needs assessment that determines how much assistance you need and what your functional eligibility is with personal care. And you have to meet institutional level of care, and that's part of that assessment. If you only need minimal assistance with something, then you probably won't qualify. But there's a algorithm within on the way we do the assessment that talks about whether or not how many hours of support you're eligible to receive every month with personal care. The services that are available through the Community First Choice, which is the entitlement program, is personal care, relief care, skill acquisition training, personal emergency response systems, assistive technology, and equipment and caregiver management training. Who provides the personal care? There are either individual providers, home care agencies, licensed assisted living and adult family home providers. And where can personal care services be provided? The services can be provided to children or adults in their home, an adult family home, or an assisted living facility. What's not covered with personal care is childcare, yard work, skilled nursing services, services provided over the phone, services to assist other non-eligible household members, pet care, and management of finances. Then we have the waiver services. Washington State has 5 waivers. What's actually being waived is that financial eligibility, and also the requirement to receive services in an institution. Years ago, the federal government only funded services if you were living in an institution. And that was way back when, and states came forward and said, we don't want to put people in institutions. We want to be able to support people in their communities. And so we guarantee it won't cost you anymore, to do that. But that's what's being waived. Those are the 2 elements. You don't have to receive services in an institution, and we waive the financial eligibility for being able to access the Medicaid services. And that's most typically children, because prior to the age of 18, the financial eligibility is based on your parents' income. Once you're 18, it's your own income. And so to get children on the waiver, that's what's being waived, is the parents' financial status. Oh, I'm going to go back a couple. Like I said, there are the 5 waivers, and I'm just going to run through them really quick. The IFS waiver is individual and family services. That's supporting people that are living at home with their families, and provides an array of services. Basic Plus has services, and that's where typically our employment services are in our Basic Plus. Core is the residential waiver that pays for supported living services in the community. SIVS is our Children's Intensive In-Home Behavioral Support Program, and that's for children that were, probably 10 years ago, maybe more, we started seeing children as young as 6 being institutionalized because the behaviors were so severe that families couldn't manage them. And so again, we went back to the feds and said, we don't want to see people in institutions. So we created a waiver program that provides the intensive in-home supports to try to keep those children at home. And then our community protection waiver is our last one, and that is for individuals whose behaviors are such that the community is put at risk. And it provides 24-hour line of sight and specialized therapies to address those behaviors. Typically, the behaviors we see in that program are either arson or sexually offending behaviors. In the Basic Plus waiver and the employment, rather than the core waiver, we have employment services available, which is what we want to talk about mostly tonight.
I'll let you do that. Okay, and here's a few more pointers I was going to be giving for eligibility. Hi, I'm Dayla Rice, and I am one of the employment specialists in Region 1. I cover 8 counties, and Chelan Douglas are 2 of those counties. And so we'll just pick up right there. Just a few things. So employment with DDA, you have to be 21 or over, mostly because, we encourage students, if possible and appropriate, to stay in school till they're 21. And then after 21 for employment, DDA could fund that. Before DDA, students can enroll in DVR, and they'll talk after we're done. But some of the services for employment are individual employment, group supported employment, community inclusion, and again, we have child development services. Who can receive these services? Again, you must be a client of DDA, eligible for their services, at least 21 years of age and no longer eligible for school services. And currently on one of those waivers that Rod was talking about. So you have to be on one of the waivers that offers employment. Or if you are enrolled in DVR and you exit DVR with a job, then we'll place you on the appropriate waiver for long-term employment supports. You're going to hear more and more about this, But waiver services do offer long-term employment supports for a lifetime. And before we tap into those waiver services, we want to start with the first line of funding, which is DVR, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And what they would do is contract with one of your employment agencies and offer employment discovery for your son or daughter. Upon learning the client's interest in employment, a referral should be made to DVR. DVR and DDA work collaboratively to assure our mutual clients have the ability to access any and all services and supports available through each of our agencies. This is a side-by-side. I'll just touch on this briefly, but this is a side-by-side of DVR services and DDA services. And I won't read all of this, but just a few things to keep in mind that DVR, they're able to start supporting students at 14. Okay, that's the big difference between DVR and DDA is DVR is 14 on up, and DDA starts supporting individuals in long-term employment at 21. Okay, individual supported employment. Well, what is that? Let me turn my page because I can see this better. Individual supported employment, it's individualized and it supports services necessary to help obtain and continue integrated employment at or above the state's minimum wage in the general workforce. These supports may include discovery. So we have an individual and they may not know what kind of work they want to do. They're not really sure what their interests are, their goals. And so we can do what's called a discovery process. And that's to get to know that person. What do you like? What do you not like? What kind of work do you want to do? What kind of work do you absolutely not want to do? You know, it's their choice. An assessment, which is a short-term trial work experiences to identify potential obstacles and probable remedies needed to be successful in their chosen career. Job preparation, mock interviews, resume portfolio development, coordination of and travel training, grooming, hygiene, education, job marketing, developing or carving jobs. Sometimes there's jobs out there that we don't know exist, or we think, you know, this would be a good thing to do in this restaurant, but it doesn't exist. So they can job carve. They can get to know the management and the owners and say, we have someone in mind that could do this for you. Let's give it a try. Job coaching. This helps the person learn and perform all of their work duties, advocates for accommodations, modifications, establishes natural supports, fade supports, ongoing supports as needed, encourages independence. And individual employment offers job retention, periodic on-site visits, advocating for advancement, monitoring progress, and retraining.
Okay, I'm going to talk specifically about transition services. Washington State is in a really unique position. I've been with the department for 44 years, and this is probably the first effort that I've seen of collaboration around all our partners that are involved. We have a collaboration with OSPI, DDA, and DVR to really support moving individuals from school to work. And so what we talk about are the 4 phases of transition, and it's aligning with the same years of a 3-year transition, the 18 to 21-year-old program. With our hope is that in the 18, when I'm first entering transition services, that's when we're all going to be working on identification and outreach. We want to identify who these students are, make sure they're connected to DDA, make sure they're connected to DVR, make sure they're, you know, applying to Social Security so they can get the Medicaid and have access to services. Second year of transition, then we move into what we call job foundation. And that's where we start to connect students to the adult providers and doing an assessment around work readiness and some of the discovery that we've already talked about. That happens in the second year of transition. Third year of transition is when we really get serious about finding the job. We spent last year getting to know all about you and what your interests are and skills and abilities. And now we're going to really go out and find you that job. You know, the hope and the goal is that we have students leaving school with a job. And then the fourth one is that job support. I have my job. That first year out of school, we are making sure that we have the services in place to support that ongoing, you know, to keep that job. By, like we talked about, by putting you on the waivers so we can fund the services. We're tracking whether you get a job or not. We're investing in bonuses for providers who get people jobs in that first year out of school. So that's our post-school attention in that fourth year. If the student doesn't get a job before they leave school, they're still on a solid pathway. So the whole focus of this process is to build the adult team along with the school. The school knows the student best. They've had them for the last 18, 12, 15 years of school, and they're sharing that knowledge with us, and we're building the adult team around them so that when school ends, the school just quietly steps aside, but the services and the adult network is built around that student and just moves forward.
Our other employment day program is called Community Inclusion, and I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is our program formerly known as Community Access. And this was designed for retirement age, so 62 and over. And that's a little ways away, so we'll just move on. And let's,
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
you want to?
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more. I mean, community inclusion, is all about, it was originally developed as a retirement program, or for individuals who've tried employment and it didn't work for them. This past year, though, legislation was passed that allows individuals to have both services. Prior to January of 23, an individual had to make a choice. Do I want to work or do I want to engage in the community in different ways? Now we can do both as of January of this year. So like all of us, we want a work-life balance. We want to be able to work and we also want to play, and individuals with disabilities want the same things we do.
We also offer individualized technical assistance, ITA. It's a supplementary service that provides assessment and consultation to the employment provider, client, and their support system to identify and address existing barriers to employment. This is in addition to support received through the supported employment services for individuals who have not yet achieved their employment goals. You might, ITA could be person-centered planning. It could be benefits planning. It could be a specialized job search. So again, that's a supplementary. It's a standalone service, really. Very good and very helpful, though. So key partners to make all this come together, we all need to work together. It's a very collaborative effort between all of us. So of course, it's all about the transition student, the individual, and their family, the county, the schools, employment and day providers, DVR, your residential providers, and your DDA case manager and other field staff. Oh, I see what you did there. So I know I'm trying to get through. So just to leave you guys with this, our commitment. All individuals who experience intellectual or developmental disabilities can be successfully employed when they are given consistent opportunities to receive services and reasonable accommodations statewide that are tailored to their unique talents and needs. That's all we have. Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna pass it over to Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, unless you guys have any questions right now. Right, Laura?
Mary, are you there?
I am here. I apologize. I have my video off. I'm having some video issues, but I am here.
You wanna do
Can you
it?
hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm kind of squeaky voice, so I don't want to get real close to this. Thanks for inviting us here tonight. My name is Laura Hamilton. I am the supervisor for the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and I provide services for both Wenatchee and DVR offices. And I am partnering with Mary tonight, and Mary is our deputy regional administrator, and she is out of Spokane, Washington. So an overview of Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, DVR transition services. All right. What is DVR? The Division of Vocational Rehabilitation is part of the Washington Department of Social and Health Services. We have 23 unit offices and 21 satellite offices across the state of Washington. And our main headquarters is based out of Olympia office in Olympia, Washington. Creating pathway to success and employment. Who do DVR serve? DVR, we are committed to serving individuals with disabilities that face barriers when attempting to obtain employment, competitive employment. I don't like reading it word for word. I apologize. And what we do is
Yes.
we have everything okay?
Sí, le escucho.
What we do is provide unique employment services and counseling to individuals with disabilities that are wanting to work within the community. Who do we partner with? We partner with agencies that advance the employment and self-sufficiency of people with disabilities across Washington State and all counties. As Rod mentioned earlier, we partner with DDA real close. We share resources, mutual client customer, so we can, they can receive the best services possible. It's a really good relationship. All right, Mary.
So why are transition services important? So they're an umbrella approach for students in their transition years, and we offer connections that bridge the gap, as Rod talked about a little bit earlier, and so did Dela, between between the school world and the adult world through employment. So our potentially eligible students. So this is a little, this is the most up-to-date data that we had from OSPI, but we have 150 or roughly 158,000 students in Washington State as of October 1st in the 21 to 22 school year were identified as students with disabilities. And almost 44,000 of those students in Washington State were identified as Section 504 students. Want to take this one, Laura?
Potential services for students and youth. Youth are identified as individuals age 14 to 21, and 14 to 24, and students are identified as individuals from 14 to 21, and services may overlap depending on one's employment path. So
En eso me perdí porque pensé que después de los 20 años ya no calificaban.
All right. So pre-employment transition services, students can start as early as age 14. And
Sí.
is someone, I keep hearing an echo, but it's making me nervous. I don't know if someone's talking to me or what, but pre-employment transition services. I'm gonna step away from this because it's making me really nervous. I got a bad hearing problem, so the microphone, I rather yell, if that's okay. Pre-employment transition services, students can start as early as 14 years of age. And of course, they wouldn't be working, but they would be participating in a group environment.
Ajá.
So, activities that they would be having at school. That foundation is the second year of school, as Rob mentioned, for students 18 to 21.
Okay. Ajá.
In a transition
Él
program.
está allá. Allí.
School to work is going to be in the third year of 18 to 21 transition program.
Mhm.
For now, rehabilitation and foster youth, transitional youth,
Los 21.
out of the school youth, other resource services. Some of the benefits.
You have to use the mic.
Really? It's really
Mhm.
making me nervous. Okay. Some of the services that we provide are assistive technology. We can run have an amazing assistive technology specialist that will even come into the classroom, go onto the work site to help with possible
Sí, me
assistive
está mandando un
technology.
mensaje la maestra, dice que cada vez que hay un problema glitching con la computadora y
Also
cada vez
offer
que
benefit
alguna
planning,
pregunta que ellos la pueden escuchar en el cuarto.
independent living,
O en el chat también.
community-based assessment, job placement and retention, and the other vocational services we can offer post-secondary.
Okay, so we're having a glitch with our technology. Folks in the Zoom room, if you can please ask your questions in the chat box, I will then make sure our speakers have the question. For some reason, every time people on Zoom are asking questions, we are getting feedback in the room. And it's hard to hear the speaker in the room. Does that make sense? So please put a chat in the chat box or question in the chat box. Thank you. And please make sure you're muted.
Thank you. I thought I was losing my mind. All righty. Who qualifies for pre-employment transition services? Students with disabilities are eligible for pre-ETS if they meet the following requirements. Must be at least age 14 up to age 21, be enrolled in high school, a post-secondary program, or other recognized educational program, receive special education or related services under Part B of IDEA, have a 504 plan, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 as amended. All righty. And like I mentioned earlier, some of the students can receive services in school and they're going to be referred to by one of our regional transition consultants. And the regional transition consultants work with the school to determine different types of group classes that would be available for the students. And they can receive pre-ETS services without applying for individualized services. And these services are usually done in a group format. So that's the reason why they don't have to apply for individualized services. If for some reason they don't do well in a classroom setting and they maybe need more one-on-one assistance, then they can be referred to us and apply for DVR services. And they would be assigned a counselor and they will work with their counselor to determine an employment goal. Oftentimes it's a broad goal since they're in school. And then the counselor, the student, and the parents, they work together to talk about a variety of services that they would need in order for them to achieve that employment goal. All righty, and we have 5 categories of pre-employment transition services.
We have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Normally they have what when they're in schools? You said something that I kind of group classes. Yeah, sorry. Hold on. Does that count, Beth?
I didn't hear the question, sorry, we're trying to figure out.
Does it count as a, like a group school thing?
I need to talk to my.
Sorry.
Pre-eds, is that what we're, yes, and Will, you are in pre-eds. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so it does count, okay.
You're in.
No problem.
Alrighty. The 5 categories, is job exploration, work-based learning, workplace readiness training, counseling on post-secondary education, and self-advocacy. That's okay, you talked about it already, didn't you? Rob's helping speed things up, y'all. All right. The purpose, DVR and county developmental disabilities, we collaborate to provide employment-related services to individuals with developmental disabilities who will be exiting the transition year. And student eligibility, DVR customers who receive transition services, DDA eligible, in their last year of the transition program, age 20 to 21. State effort to provide school to work for our students with developmental disabilities. All righty. And if a student leaves school without a job, now what? Well, you know what? Most of all the students are already going to be working with DVR. They're going to be on a plan, so they're just going to continue forward with that plan. They will work with a job coach that they've selected, and we'll just move forward. It's exactly what will happen. Yeah.
How common is it for if your loved one is doing the pre-eds in the group transition setting? How often is it that they do more intensive with the one-on-one pre-eds?
Okay, that's a good question. Like, so in a group setting, and
Or even doing a CBA.
a community-based assessment wouldn't really typically be part of transition services. It could be a service that they would receive on an individualized plan. It's going to vary from student to student. The group services, I believe, meet weekly. It just depends on exactly what they're doing. And if they're on an individualized plan, we meet quite often. Like, you know, we do the eligibility. We have 60 days to determine eligibility. And then once the eligibility is done, we work with the student and the parent to determine the necessary services that's going to allow them to get a job. Did I answer your question? Well, okay, we can talk after. Okay. All right. All right. Are you still there, Mary?
I am. So to answer the question, so we can provide some individualized pre-ed services on caseloads. So some of those pre-ed services can be delivered one-on-one on caseloads, just depending on the student's individualized needs. So we do that vocational assessment process, and if that determines that some of those needs are more individualized one-on-one services, we can provide some individualized one-on-one pre-ed services, but that could be discussed with the voc rehab counselor. And we can talk about that more after the meeting if people have individualized questions. But yes, some pre-ed services can be delivered individually on caseload services to answer that question.
All righty. Thank you, Mary. All righty. Other resources available, community-based resources and referral, transportation resources and guidance, and other state services referral. And counseling and guidance, assessments, benefits planning, independent living, assistive technology, training and education, job-related services, work strides, career development workshops. All right, so this slide shows a little bit about the process. So for individualized services, you're just going to contact the office and schedule what we call an intake. And at the time of intake, we go over what DVR does and complete a VI form. And then at the end, if you're interested and you would like to apply, you just sign an application. And once the application is signed, we work really, really hard to get the eligibility completed. We have 60 days to get it done by law, but we try to get it done as quickly as possible. And then, once they are in eligibility, then we will, I'm not sure, the vocational assessment, priority of services.
That's order of selection, but currently we don't have any closed categories right now. Every category is open right now.
That's the reason I was confused. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to redo that, Mary.
Yeah.
So, and then vocational assessment, you know, conversations with the counselor regarding what types of maybe work experiences you had at school, what type of work experiences we'd like to do. We do have a couple of vocational assessments. We have one that's called the World of Work Inventory. We call it the WOWI for short. And we just have our different sorts. And I find it most useful just sitting down with the students and talking about what do you like doing? What did you do at school? And then we start listing all the skills and all the abilities, and they're like, wow, you know, I really do know how to, I have a lot to offer, right? And then with that information, we'll see if the vocational interest, the job that they want to do, see if everything aligns, and we'll go from there. And you know, and the thing about it is we'll talk about and say, okay, you want to get there, you need this and this. So oftentimes it's just talking and saying, okay, we can totally do this. We may need some accommodations, but that's okay. And we're there to make sure and to try to get them into that goal that they really, really want to do. So that's a real fun part. And then once the goal has been established, then we do what's called an individualized plan for employment. And that's where we enter in all the services that the student's going to be receiving in order to get to that goal. And then at the end, a successful employment, right? Awesome. All righty, application, when to apply. Students leaving high school at age 18, contact with local DVR office. So if most of the students are already going to be with the individualized, you know, counselor. But if not, say you never did individualized services once you graduated from high school, from group services, and you still interested in DVR services, that would be a really good time to apply for services. Student continuing through their transition program, leaving school at age 21. We got Job Foundation, School to Work, and DVR is a part of each of these programs. Any adult seeking services apply at any time.
Can I just say something really quick to that last slide, Flora?
Absolutely.
So the hope is that students will be connected with DVR well before they exit high school. So partnering with DDA, the Job Foundations program, students are connected early to DVR. So like Rod and Dayla were talking about earlier, that seamless transition, the school steps away, DVR supports are there, DDA supports are there. There's that collaborative process, there's that team approach. So the student is set up for success so that when they leave high school, their team is founded, established, and they have the supports that they need to successfully leave their transition program, so that they have all the supports wrapped around them, ready to go, that they need when they leave high school. So they're already established with DVR and DDA. They know their counselor, they have their plan for employment, hopefully employment already before they leave high school, right? That's the goal, or their transition program. And so they're already connected to all the agencies well before they leave their transition program. That is the goal of these programs like Job Foundations that you've heard about in School to Work, these transition programs, to engage students way earlier on the process so that they have an earlier chance at employment and engagement with our agencies at a much earlier age. That's the goal of those programs. I just wanted to chime in and say that.
A couple questions.
Yeah.
So one of my, you have not mentioned the financial, like eligibility financially, but DDR did. DDA, sorry, too many letters. But so, you know, with my daughter, because she's receiving survivor Social Security.
Okay.
I am not sure where she's gonna fall on eligibility, but will she still be able, she has Down syndrome, will she still be able to get DVR services?
That's a really good question. About the financial piece is one good thing about DVR is for transition services, if a student's on an IEP or 504 plan, they're automatically qualified for transition services. It does not matter how much the parents make. Social Security, it depends. Anybody that's receiving, like, is she over 18?
She is, and this will be her last year in the
Okay.
school district. She kind of has a job, but she kind of needs job coaching.
This is really, and the good news is because she receives a type of Social Security and she's over the age of 18, her income's not going to matter. She's going to be able to receive services. Yeah, good question. Thank you. All righty. And the eligibility criteria for the student, they just have to be on a 504 IEP or a student with a disability for transition services. And you a physical or mental or sensory disability that makes it difficult to get or keep a job that matches your skill, potential, and interest. You need services and support such as counseling, training, or assistance with a job search in order to get or keep a job. And you can benefit from DVR services. Yeah. We talked about that one already, the eligibility timeline, and talked about that. Yeah, we talked about a lot. You guys, I'm sorry, I was really having a hard time filtering in everything earlier. I apologize, but this is my contact information. Reach out if you have any questions, call me, email me. I will get back to you that day or the very next day at the latest. I'm excited to work with the youth. It's a wonderful time. And there's just a lot of amazing opportunities out there for everyone. So thank you for having me here tonight.
Thanks, Laura. The one thing that I do want to reinforce, getting back to the question you had earlier about the financial eligibility piece, the one thing that you can be reassured is the state of Washington is absolutely committed to people working. And so if a person isn't eligible financially for waivers or other ways that we support services, there are ways to make that happen because we want to see people working. If they're not eligible to be on a waiver, we can use state-only funding if they're working. So that's why it's important that we have this collaboration with DVR to make sure the students are in fact getting jobs. We will figure out a way to support somebody who's working. Does anybody have any questions here? Beth, are you monitoring the chat? Were there any questions in the chat?
We don't have any questions online at this point.
Okay, then I guess we're done for the evening.
So everyone that's here, thank you so much for joining us. I know that in the Wenatchee program, we are connecting our students with all of the providers, DDA, DVR. We talk about those things with our students. I know they do that in the Eastmont programs as well and Project Search. So just make sure if you have questions, reach out to your teachers, reach out to Tamara and Jared. They know the answers too, and that we have so many people in our community that are here to work with you and your students or with our self-advocates. So just please reach out and ask questions. We will find the answers. If we don't know them, we'll get you connected with the people who do have the answers. And make sure you take brochures because everything we've learned tonight from DDA is on that table. And Dela will happily pass it out. Thank you so much for joining us.